In the 20th century, clouds were seeded by numerous countries around the globe with various chemicals to produce rain. China was just doing this over the summer in Beijing to make sure that there weren't any rain, that there wasn't any rain during the Olympics. But all this has changed dramatically with the U.S. military's secretive research and plans to control the planet's natural weather. This has not been given very much press, and we have to remember that we have a corporate-owned press where 85% of radio, television, and print media is owned by 5 corporations. So they're not going to talk about things that are of really serious consequence, and that's somewhat of the blessing, a mixed blessing of the internet, but there's certainly plenty of information on weather modification. The Air Force is on record as saying, quote, they want to control the weather by 2025, and we are not talking about just seeding the clouds for rain. Weather modification means, quote, any activity performed with the intention of producing artificial changes in the composition, behavior, or dynamics of the atmosphere, unquote. And as of April this year, there are more than 150 different weather modification programs around the world. Since about 2000, the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy have been spraying the entire United States sky with a toxic brew of chemicals and other biologic agents. Just want to show you something. We have 2 different kinds of trails in the sky right now. One are called contrails. How many of you know what contrails are? Contrails are what have been around from the ends of planes since World War II. These are very, very short exhaust trails that usually evaporate within a few minutes. You just look up at the sky and you'll just see a jet, sometimes with 4 trails, but it evaporates pretty quickly. How many of you know what chemtrails are? The military and some commercial planes are spraying us with what are called chemtrails. I want you to look at these. And oftentimes, before there's a weather front, there are heavy assaults from these planes just before a weather front is changed and comes in. Military and some commercial jets have been fitted with huge barrels of at least 49 different kinds of documented chemical poisons. Among other documented ingredients in this toxic man-made clouds are pathogenic molds, fungi, weaponized viruses, and made in some places like the secret site at Fort Detrick, Maryland, which is supposed to be a cancer site. But there are a number of scholars and professors tracking this that have big questions about this. Barium and nanoaluminum particles. What do these do to the human body? Barium is an alkaline earth mineral. It was discovered in 1774. At low doses, it can act as a muscle stimulant. At high doses, it detrimentally affects the heart and the nervous system. Barium is toxic to all mammals, and that means not just humans. Aluminum, which is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, is known to diminish kidney function and destroy brain cells and cognitive function. Just think about it. Just between the aluminum and the mercury that we're breathing all the time, we've got already a serious issue about brain function and cognitive function. There is also documented evidence that the aluminum in chemtrails is released as nanoparticles, and that when they reach the Earth environment for wildlife in lakes and streams, it's causing serious problems with wildlife there. Researchers are also finding that nanoparticles interfere with the growth of plants. Nanotechnology is totally unregulated. Just this past month, a new research report came out showing and documenting for the first time that these nanoparticles actually go through the skin. Well, if you breathe them, whether they go through the skin or whether you're inhaling them, it's still a problem, a serious problem. Other toxic chemicals that have been documented include ammonia, ammonium chloride, bismuth, cadmium, one of the most toxic elements also in the environment, hexabromobenzene, lead, potassium iodine, potassium perchlorate, sulfur, and xylene. This is just a toxic spew of carcinogens, serious respiratory and skin irritants, cardiovascular and gastrointestinal toxicants. I'm asking, is there a relationship between asthma, now the #3 killer in the United States, and staggering rates of it for small children, up from #10 a decade ago, and the chemtrails? According to Clifford Carnicom, who's been studying chemtrails for 9 years now, and I met with him to discuss this in detail this summer, quote, "The true nature of these aerosol operations remain undisclosed and closed to fair examination by the public. All of this is being done by stealth to keep us in ignorance." There is a long, long history in the United States, tragically, not the kind of history that you learn in college textbooks, about secret chemical exposure to which Americans were subjected. I'd like to read you just a few of them. In 1931, Dr. Cornelius Rhodes, under the auspices of the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Investigations, infected human subjects with cancer cells. They were not told about it. He later went on to establish the U.S. Army Biological Warfare Facility in Maryland, Utah, and Panama, and then was named to the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. While there, he began a series of radiation exposures, experiments on American soldiers and civilians in hospitals. In 1942, Chemical Warfare Services began mustard gas experiences on approximately 4,000 servicemen. The experiments continued until 1945 and made use of the Seventh-day Adventists who chose to become human guinea pigs rather than serve on duty. 1965, prisoners in a prison in Philadelphia were subjected to dioxin. Dioxin is so toxic, it is a byproduct of chlorine when it breaks down, whether it's in Clorox or in tampons, and a teaspoon could literally kill the entire planet. Dioxin is a carcinogen, and it's part of Agent Orange that was suspected even before the military used it for Desert Storm. In 1996, the Department of Defense admits that Desert Storm exposure for all of the military, they were exposed to chemical agents, including Agent Orange. So I have questions that have to be part of an urgently needed public discussion and outcry. When is this going to stop? Obviously, you don't know, and I would urge you, they're outside. There's a list of websites that you can go to, not just to Clifford Carnicom's, but this is the most, his website is the most well-documented one with lots of medical information. I've talked to over 100 doctors just in this past 6 months, naturopaths, MDs, all sorts of people in healthcare, and there we have staggering rates of upper respiratory and cardiovascular problems that we never used to have. There's a brand new emerging field, and that's called environmental cardiology, and they're not even dealing with the issues of weather modifications and chemtrails. I'd like to know, how are the real drought conditions by nature exacerbated by a constant spew of aerosols in the chemtrails? How much of global warming or climate change is actually caused by billions of tons of these aerosols that have been sprayed over us for the last 8 years without our permission? It's not just CO2 emissions that we have to deal with, but we have to deal with weather modification. How is weather modification by the military destabilizing our planet's natural weather? A controversial weather modification bill was just passed. Bush just signed it to the 109th Congress. There was no public discussion. These bills did not include any agricultural, water, EPA, or public representatives, and did not have any provisions for congressional, state, county, or public oversight of either expenditures, medical, and/or environmental consequences. In other words, we've really been guinea pigs for at least the last 8 years with literally every breath we take. 7 days a week, 365 days a year. What we are breathing now, as one of my dear friends says, the indoor air is just the same. What the indoor air is just the outdoor air inside. In addition, the Pentagon is on record this summer as saying it wants to resume open-air testing of biologic weapons. There's a flyer outside on this with some research that Professor Francis Boyle has done. And he's been quoted recently as saying, the Pentagon is fully prepared to launch biological warfare, yet much of this technology is being used on us without our permission. We are signatories to no germ warfare and to the Nuremberg trials.